Hi, welcome to Explorations in Economic History. This is Explorations in Economic History and Thought Socialism, and today we're going to talk about Marx's utopianism. Of course, Marx argued that his socialism was scientific, not utopian, but what we'll talk about today is whether Marx had a utopian vision for the future in the sort of broad sense of the term, and whether Lenin also had the same vision, and that'll kind of give us a framework for looking at what happened when Lenin did put into practice what he saw as Marx's ideas and theories. So we're going to start out by looking at the Bolshevik vision. This is the vision that Lenin had and that was presented by the party in the early Soviet Union time period during war communism under Lenin. And then from there we'll step back and look at Marx and put together the entire sort of Marxist Bolshevik vision. But so in the early Soviet Union period, there was a book called The ABC of Communism that every school child had to read, and in it was said, the communist way of production presupposes not production for the market, but for its own needs. Not every individual produces for himself, but the entire gigantic cooperative produces for all. Consequently, we do not have commodities, only products. These products will not be exchanged, nor will they be bought or sold. Notice it's talking about the future. This was a vision for the future, not what was said to already exist at the time. They will just go to joint warehouses and be given to those who need them. In such conditions, money will no longer be required. So this was the ideal. This is what the Bolsheviks were working towards. And here I'll have to give you another long quote, but this one is from Marx, and it's quite famous, so bear with me. In a higher phase of communist society, and we have already discussed a bit about the lower phase and the higher phase, after the enslaving subordination of the individual to the division of labor, and therewith also the antithesis between mental and physical labor, has vanished. So Adam Smith's division of labor, gone. This is part of the utopian vision. After labor has become not only a means of life, but life's prime want, after the productive forces have also increased, with the all-round development of the individual, and all the springs of cooperative wealth flow more abundantly. So we're imagining here that everything is much more productive now that we've gotten rid of the division of labor. Only then can the narrow horizon of bourgeois right be crossed in its entirety, and society inscribe upon its banners, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. So note that as part of the utopian vision, bourgeois rights are crossed, we've gotten beyond bourgeois rights onto a higher value, which is from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. So let's look more closely at what Marx said were sort of the prerequisites to this utopian society. Marx said for the higher phase of communism, there must be an end to the division of labor. Labor has become a joy. Productivity has increased. There's an all-round development of the individual. All the springs of cooperative wealth flow more abundantly, and only then can the narrow horizon of bourgeois rights be crossed in its entirety. So the question is, does that mean that some market forces must exist until the higher phase is reached? Right? Because only then can the narrow horizon of bourgeois right be crossed in its entirety. Well, the short answer is no. Marx called on the people to create revolution. Revolution was to bring socialism, or the lower phase, not yet from each according to his ability to each according to his needs, but In the meantime, he would receive the full product of his labor, or to each according to his work. This would then lead to the society in which work and life would be a great joy, and all the other conditions would be met. So why is it that you wouldn't have markets until then? Well, because you can't go straight from bourgeois society or capitalism straight to communism. You need to have that in-between step with the dictatorship of the proletariat or worker state, where the workers then give everyone the full product of their labor. Only that would allow the people to learn to govern and to develop and to take control of the means of production, and through that taking control actually become the new man that they have to be in order to usher in the higher phase of communism. Well, what about the prerequisite of developed capitalism? Didn't Marx say that capitalism has to be quite advanced in its development before you could bring socialism? Well, capitalism was further ahead in Western Europe, but the Bolsheviks argued that it had developed sufficiently in Russia. Lenin argued this in The Development of Capitalism in Russia. And it is worth noting that Russia in 1917 was as advanced as Germany in 1848, when Marx considered it to be ripe. Marx argued in 1848 and before and after that Germany, being one of the more advanced countries at the time, was ideal for bringing socialism. A more backward country was less ideal, but Germany in 1848 was well advanced enough, and Russia, although it was behind Germany by 1917, had certainly caught up to where Germany had been in 1848. So as a quick note, it wasn't to be capitalism and bourgeois rights that would allow the evolution towards the communist society. There had to be the in-between step of the dictatorship of the proletariat or the worker state with a plan. So the production without any definite plan of capitalist society capitulates to the production upon a definite plan of the invading socialist society, and that is the to each according to his work stage, or the lower phase of communism. Well, so how would this transformation occur? Well, after seizing power through revolution, the vanguard would give the workers, the people, control over the resources, creating a workers' state. And this would be able to usher in an era of enlightenment and abundance, because as the workers learned to govern the resources and rationally control them, they would fulfill Marx's prerequisites. They would learn to govern and develop as individuals. So Marx takes his utopianism to another place when he begins to talk about alienation. Marx argued that man was social, but a social being, but that property alienated man. And then he goes on to argue that therefore common ownership, because it's private property that alienates man to Marx, so common ownership would allow humans to transcend this alienation and change human nature. A new enrichment of human nature is possible with common ownership. Common ownership would erase the antagonism between individuals. So, in other words, we should be able to all get along beautifully, have harmony, an end to aggression, and an end to all suffering. And Marx goes even further to say that, in fact, man can transcend the estrangement and resolve the dichotomy of the division of self and other. So this sounds spiritual, even like Buddhism or something. We can resolve the dichotomy of the division of self and other. We can overcome all boundaries between us. Marx also spoke about the end of history. He said, communism as fully developed naturalism equals humanism, and as fully developed humanism equals naturalism. It is the genuine resolution of the conflict between man and nature and between man and man. He said the true resolution of the strife between existence and essence, between objectification and self-confirmation, between freedom and necessity, between the individual and the species. Communism is the riddle of history solved, and it knows itself to be the solution. He really wasn't shy of saying that he could solve all the world's problems. And it's very spiritual language. And it also addresses freedom and necessity. In other words, all the questions that libertarianism and every other kind of ideology attempts to solve, he argues, is solved by his version of history, which culminates in communism.